when you die, you shouldn't leave a single cent. Don't leave any money, don't leave any assets, don't even leave a will. At the end of your life, on your deathbed, your goal should be to have absolutely nothing. When you first hear this advice, you're probably in complete shock. And this is contrary to what most people believe. And it's contrary to what I used to believe. And I can even see people just rushing to the comments. Think of the children. How could you be so heartless? Why not leave a single cent behind for your kids? That's not what I said. Let me explain. So, I've been meaning to make this video for a while just because of how like life-altering this book was for me. And to be honest, I've just been too lazy. But, so a while back, I had read the book Die with Zero by Bill Perkins, and it legit changed the way I view life, and I really wanted to share and maybe give you some perspective, right? You don't necessarily have to believe it, but I just think that it's a really life-altering way of kind of seeing this different perspective that really, I do believe, a lot of people could benefit from. Honestly, the thing that really pushed me over the edge to make me want to write this video, or to make this video, is actually a little bit after I read the book. I'd gone to a Lunar New Year street festival, so this was a while back, right? I'm filming this as of May, so this is a while back. But I went to a Lunar New Year street festival where basically it was in SF, and the city hosts, I don't know if it's a city, I don't know how it works, but like basically there's a bunch of vendors, right? And they'll all have their little tents, and they're promoting their product, their service, or whatever. And sometimes they'll have like a little wheel, and you can spin it for honestly like the crappiest presents that you can imagine. So like Band-Aid holders, like screen cleaners, hand sanitizer, keychains, you know, that type of stuff. Like nothing more than like $1, if that, in value. But even though the gifts were so bad, right, you would see these ridiculously long lines of just a bunch of like 60, 70, 80-year-old like Chinese old ladies just waiting in line, spending like at least like half an hour to an hour cumulatively on waiting in line for all these different booths, just passing out the same thing, the same like crappy grocery bags, the same keychains, hand sanitizer, as I said before, which honestly like they'll probably never use. They'll probably just bring it, like, hey look, I got some free stuff. They'll bring it home and then just keep it there. And just a tangent, free things, the power of the free, the power of zero. If you want to learn more about that, I think Dan Ariely talks about that stuff as well, but that's completely off topic. Anyways, they spend all this time of just like waiting in line and saving and hoarding all these things that are like, they're not even going to use it, but they still do it, and they're trying to save all that stuff. And my question is just why? Right? It's not just old Chinese ladies. It's not just that demographic. I feel like this kind of thought of, oh, I need to save, like this type of hoarding mentality is found everywhere. And like the miserly old person, or like miserly old grandma or grandpa, is actually like a constant in like so many different cultures. They've lived to 60, 70, 80, and you've already spent your entire life working and saving money, and you continue saving money forever and ever. But for what? What are you going to do with all the things that you saved? All the money, all the items, all the assets. The moment you die, all those things are completely useless to you. Right? There's a Chinese saying which is 人在天堂，錢在銀行. Directly translated, it's the person's in heaven, but then the money is in the bank account. So it's like, what are you going to do with all the cash? What are you saving for all these years for you not to be able to use a single dime of it? So something that Bill Perkins asks is, if you knew that you were going to die tomorrow, how would you change the way that you're living right now? How would you live today? Okay, keep that in mind. Now, how would you live if you knew you're going to die in 2 days? Would it be any different? It might be a little bit different, but like maybe instead of going like completely like off the rails, maybe today you go like slightly off the rails, and then tomorrow you go completely off the rails. Okay, now what if you knew you're going to die in a week? Right? How would that change how you lived? What about in a month? In a year? Right? I mean, don't we already know about when we'll die, right? Like we can estimate, we can guess. I mean, like knock on wood, right? You live a long, healthy life, right? You make it to like 100. 120, 150, maybe you make it to 150 years old. But the point is, you know that your time alive, it's limited, right? There is a cap. There's no one that's going to live forever. But why do we go through life living as if we were going to live forever? We save money as if, well, I'll take that vacation some other time when I make a little bit more money. I'll take that vacation another time when my kids are out of the house, right? There's all these things that we just kind of keep postponing the things we want to do for kind of just not even like doing things that we want to do, but like kind of just maintaining the status quo, and just kind of, you have this saving mentality. I think the biggest kind of shock to me, in my opinion, is like, we can't live as if we're going to live forever, right? We know we're going to die eventually. So if you spend all this time saving, all this time like working and like thinking, oh, I'll do it, I'm doing this for the future, but the future never comes. The future is always the future. The present is the only thing that you can live in, right? You can only live in the present. So the question is just why? Why are you saving? Bill Perkins actually goes into this, and one of the tips he gives in kind of almost forcing yourself, or like telling yourself and kind of giving yourself like the task of doing and accomplishing things, is to separate your life into like buckets. Maybe you have like the adolescent bucket, and then you have the young adult bucket, and then you have like the 25 to 30-ish before you get married bucket, or before you have kids bucket, and then you have the while my kids are still young bucket, right? And then you have all these different buckets until the very end of your life. And he talks about how there are a lot of like activities that you can only do while you're young, or while you're in specific buckets, right? So for example, you're not going to go hang gliding or parachuting, or maybe you will, but most people, they're not going to go hang gliding, parachuting, running a marathon, hiking Machu Picchu. They're not going to do this when they're 85, right? You can't do that. You can't save that stuff for when you're 85, right? There's certain things that you can only do at specific age ranges, and after that certain point, then you just can't do that anymore, and like you've lost the opportunity to do that. So even if you're saving all this money, the longer you save money, yeah, you'll have more money, but just due to physical limitations, or even due to like responsibilities, right? Maybe there's certain things that you could do, maybe like hikes, do a trip and hike, like I don't know, some random place for like 3 years, like go to the Amazon and just live there for a year. You can't do that if you have kids, if you have responsibilities, but you can do that while you're younger, right? It would still be difficult, but you can still do it. He mentions that when you're young, it's a lot easier to take risks, and also to kind of like blow away all your money, because there's multiple reasons, right? One, it's better just because you can actually do it when you're young, and two, your time isn't worth anything, right? So think about it like this: when you're fresh out of college, how much is your time worth? Not much, because you have a entry-level position. But as you progress and you get like higher into you become more professional, you become more like higher up, then your time becomes worth a lot more. So you could spend, like when you're 19, 20, you spend like 3 years saving up money, and eventually you'll have, I have 5K to my name, right? I saved up 5K. If you spent a fraction of that time while you're like 35, 40, you could spend a fraction of that time to save up the same amount of money. So why not do more things while you're young? The other thing is, we've all heard of inflation. As time goes on, right, money is worth less. So like $1 back then could buy you a McChicken from McDonald's. Now, I heard it's like $3 for a McChicken, bruh. But that's not the only thing, right? That's not the only way that money depreciates over time. The other thing, Bill Perkins talks about this story of his friend, who, I think he said something about like, he had like no money to his name, right? He did a solo trip in Europe, and he'd pay like $1 for living in some place with like 20 dudes. You can do that while you're young, right? You could sleep on like cement while you're young, and that's free. You can sleep on a cardboard box while you're young. But like the older you get, you don't have that luxury to just sleep wherever and do whatever. When you're like maybe 60, 70, right? Maybe you'll have back pains. Maybe it's just not comfortable. Like you just can't like live like that. So like, even though a day of room and board when you're like 19, 20 costs, let's say $5, assuming you have some like some B&B, and you're like sharing your room, you're boarding with like 20 people, versus when you're 60, you can't do that. Maybe that room and board when you're 60 is now going to cost like $150, $200, because you just aren't able to physically deal with those circumstances, or that you just can't do it. So let's say you have $100. When you're young, that $100 can bring you, can give you a lot more than the $100 can if you're much older. So this is another reason why you should really, like, if given the opportunity while you're younger, kind of do those things, because in the future, first of all, it's going to be more expensive to do so, but also you won't have the physical capabilities to do as much. In the future, you'll actually have to have more money to do the same things, and you just physically won't be able to do it, right? That's the idea of these buckets. Now, the second reason why you should really create these memories earlier rather than later is something that Bill Perkins calls a memory dividend. So let's say you're like 45, right? And you go to a party. They're talking about, then in the party, you meet some people, you're just chatting about things that you've done. Someone's talking about, like, oh, I went to see the Great Wall of China. Someone's saying I went to Hawaii. And then you, because you've been saving money this entire time, you don't have these memory dividends, right? Those dividends are so important for multiple reasons, right? So first of all, just think about, like, do you remember, like, something like a really cool event that happened, or like a really fun event that happened while you're younger? Well, every time you think back, sometimes you'll smile. Sometimes you'll be like, oh, that was such a fun time, right? Think about all those little nuggets of joy that you get just from remembering that event that occurred. The more memories that you can create while you're younger, then the more happiness you can kind of take from that. It kind of relates it to, like, interest or dividends, right? So the more dividends you can kind of extract from it in the future. But that's not the only thing, right? So, like, even if you're at this party, what if it's a networking event, right? If you can relate to someone else because you share a memory dividend, right? So maybe you guys both really liked hiking in Hawaii, or you both really liked the I don't know, something like Texas barbecue, I don't know, whatever it is, right? If you both have these shared experiences, then you can kind of leverage that experience in this networking event to bring you even further up, because people like to talk to and like to work with people that they can relate with. So that's the idea of a memory dividend, which I also think is a really persuasive reason why you should invest in these memory dividends earlier rather than later, and do more things earlier than later. Now, I've been saving this for the very end, right? Because everyone's like, but what about my kids? I need to save money, I need to save assets, I need to save stuff for my kids. Okay, on average, how old will you be when you pass on? We'll say, so the average life expectancy in America is like 78. We'll say like 80, but let's just say you're 150. Okay, now you pass on that money to your kids. What is your, let's say 130? Let's say you had kids when you were 100. What are they gonna do with your money at 50, 60, 70? Right? They're not going to be able to really leverage it, because do most people start businesses? Do most people start, like, being an entrepreneur at 50, 60, 70? They don't. Well, I don't know why my voice is so weird sounding, but they don't. They start investing, they start being an entrepreneur usually at like 20, 30, maybe 40. So your money is not going to be useful to them. They're just going to save it too, right? What are they going to do with their money at 50, 60, 70? They're going to start a business? They're going to start a restaurant or something? When Bill Perkins says leave nothing for their kids when you die, it doesn't mean that you just leave nothing for your kids, but you should have already, like, portioned out some of your money for your kids beforehand. And that should be already allocated in something allocated for your kids. So that's not even part of your net worth while you're on your deathbed. And that just, like, honestly, that also was something that blew my mind, because I never thought about it like that. You're right. Like, what am I going to do at like 56? I'm not going to be able to take risks. I'm not going to be able to do those things, right? I have too many responsibilities to take risks, to use your money to take risks, right? But at that, like 50, 60, 70, you already have like an established family. You don't have the luxury of being able to take this risk to start a business, to whatever, because you have a lot more on the line, right? You'd much rather kind of stick with your comfy job, even though maybe it's not the job that you want, but you have to stick with that comfy job because you have bills to pay. Versus when you're at 20, 30, maybe not so much. And then maybe you'll say, oh, you can just give it to your grandkids or your great grandkids. Bill Perkins has a response to this as well. Well, would you leave your money to strangers? You didn't teach your grandkids. You didn't teach your great grandkids. You don't know how they were brought up. You don't know how their personalities are. not as much as you know your own kids, right? So you're kind of just leaving money to a stranger, because maybe their personality, which you didn't teach because it was your great grandkids problem for teaching your great grandkids to be drug addicts, right? You don't know if they're drug addicts, you don't know anything. Basically that means that you're just leaving your money to strangers, and it's just a flip of a coin whether or not you know that's going to be, like, they're going to be wise with their money that you spent your entire life working for, and you haven't been able to use a single dime of it, or maybe they're just going to blow it all on black, right? You don't know. So like this idea of, think about the children, the best course of action is, if you do have excess money, is to let them be able to kind of take the risk and use your money while they still can, and while that money has the greatest potential to help them, and also to kind of propel them in life. But I think that the biggest thing is just, you saved your money for your entire life, right? Use it. You don't want to just be like working your entire life. Like, how sad is that you worked all your life and you saved all this money and you haven't been able to use it? Just ask yourself this, right? If you were like on your deathbed, how much more money would you pay to be able to live another day, another week, another month, another year? If you're willing to spend that much money on just living a little bit longer, why don't you just spend, like, people on their deathbeds are always, they don't regret doing things. They regret not doing things. They regret not taking risks. They don't regret not doing what they want to do, right? And you don't want to find yourself in that situation. You want to kind of live a fulfilling life. Like, I can't explain this as well as Bill Perkins does. I would highly recommend reading his book, Die With Zero. And it just, like, this is a complete mentality shift that I think is very, very eye-opening. I don't know, I hope I was able to kind of convey his message somehow. Like, I'm bad at explaining things, but I just found it really, really enlightening. So that's it. That's this video. Peace.